So they called themselves the Brotherhood of Eternal Love. But to the FBI, well, they had a very different name, the Hippie Mafia. Their story is just one of the wildest, most contradictory tales to come out of the 1960s counterculture. And we're about to unpack how a group of surfers went from, chasing enlightenment to running a global drug empire. This question from a 1972 Rolling Stone article just hits the nail on the head. An insidious international acid cabal? Or just a bunch of ragtag longhairs? Were they missionaries or were they mobsters? The answer, as you'll see, is way more complicated than you might think.
The legend that grew around them sounds like something straight out of a pulp novel. We're talking stories of spies and secret presses for fake passports, even water pistols filled with LSD. It's really no wonder the press gave them a nickname that stuck, the Hippie Mafia.
Okay, so let's start right there and let's try to peel back some of the layers of that myth. To really understand the Hippie Mafia, we've got to separate the wild headlines from what was honestly a much stranger reality.
Because before there was this massive criminal enterprise, there was a chemical. To really get the Brotherhood, you first have to understand the strange, polarizing power of LSD back in the 1960s.
And that takes us right into the psychedelic dawn of the 50s and early 60s. This was a time when one single chemical, LSD, was seen as two completely, and I mean completely, different things. Either it was a holy sacrament or it was a dangerous weapon.
Just think about that for a second, this incredible split. On one side, you've got these visionaries like Aldous Huxley and Timothy Leary, and they're hailing LSD as a path to true enlightenment. But at the exact same time, the CIA is secretly studying it as a potential mind control weapon for the Cold War. It was either salvation or a weapon. There was pretty much no middle ground.
And the Brotherhood of Eternal Love was born right smack in the middle of that strange intersection. Not in some government lab or a fancy university, but on the sun-drenched beaches of Southern California.
What's really crucial here is that they didn't start out as these big-time kingpins. No, they were just surfers, petty criminals. Then, in 1965, their leader, a guy named John Griggs, gets his hands on some pure LSD and takes the whole gang out to Joshua Tree. And what happened there? Well, it was a profound collective spiritual awakening. By 1966, they weren't a gang anymore. They were a legally incorporated, tax-exempt church with a mission to turn on the world. And their cathedral? It was a head shop in Laguna Beach called Mystic Arts World.
And this all led to their core philosophy, something they called righteous dealing. It was this really powerful idea that let them see themselves not as criminals, but as missionaries. In their own minds, they weren't selling drugs, they were distributing a sacrament that was going to save the world.
Okay, but here's the thing. A spiritual mission that big, well, it needs money. Lots of it. And that's how this small band of idealists started building a massive international empire, all centered around a little something called Orange Sunshine. So to get the cash for their psychedelic crusade, they set up this unbelievably sophisticated smuggling pipeline. It all started with high-quality hashish from Afghanistan. They'd pack it into these custom-built hidden compartments in VW campers and then just ship the cars back to the States. It was brilliant, super efficient, and yeah, immensely profitable.
But listen, the hash, that was just business. Their real passion, their signature product, was a legendary strain of LSD known as Orange Sunshine. These potent little orange pills became absolutely iconic in the counterculture, and they totally cemented the Brotherhood's reputation.
So, just how big did this whole thing get? Federal investigators later estimated that the Brotherhood's network generated $200 million. Let that sink in. In just a few short years, they went from a spiritual awakening in the desert to a global enterprise.
And this, right here, really highlights the total disconnect. The public face of the counterculture was all peace, love, and, posters you'd buy from the back of Rolling Stone magazine. But underneath it all, operating in the shadows, was this massive clandestine network that was secretly fueling the entire scene.
Of course, you can't build an empire that big and expect to go unnoticed forever. Eventually, the law decided it was time to catch up.
So a huge multi-agency task force, they called it Operation BEL for Brotherhood of Eternal Love, was formed just to take these guys down. Using wiretaps, informants, surveillance, the whole shebang, they launched a series of massive coordinated raids in August of '72. And in the ultimate twist, prosecutors used conspiracy laws that were actually designed to fight the real mafia, making that hippie mafia nickname an official legal strategy.
So the raids just completely shattered the empire. But the end of the Brotherhood only deepened the questions about who they really were, leaving behind a complicated and, honestly, a fascinating legacy.
Which brings us right back to that big question we started with, doesn't it? After everything, who were they? Were they these naive idealists or just really clever criminals with a good cover story?
And the answer, of course, is, well, they were both, right? Their origins were genuinely idealistic. They really saw themselves as pioneers on a spiritual mission. But at the same time, you just can't ignore the reality of what they built: a massive, sophisticated, international drug syndicate.
And that leaves us with this incredible paradox at the heart of their story. The Brotherhood's spiritual mission required a criminal enterprise to function. It really makes you wonder, could a movement for consciousness ever truly escape the underworld it needed to survive? That, right there, is the unresolved legacy of the hippie mafia.